Good morning, everyone. I hope you got enough sleep so you're prepared for this fourth step. Action. My goodness. So from the outset of this set of quotations and writings, we saw how Shoghi Effendi linked these four elements, these four steps together in such a way. Sometimes he says, study the writings that leads to prayer. The prayer should be then meditated on, and finally it should all be acted upon. Action is the outcome of the three. If you start with the action without the three, I don't know how effective. The promises are all there with regard to when you do the four of them together. Now, this is an underpinning, if you will, for the 5-year plan actions, the successive 5-year plan actions of the House of Justice, which call on us to arise, and they tell us which way to go and how to act. But the reinforcement, the energy, we have to bring to it. We have to bring from our own closeness with Baha'u'llah, from our own communion with our own, if you will, humility before His presence, so that we have energies to carry out the plan of the House of Justice. So if someone thinks, what in the world is Mr. Dunbar talking about? It has nothing to do with the plan. It doesn't have much to do with the elements of the plan. It has to do with the reinforcement of the plan. And as I mentioned earlier, I said, I've been going across the world, I found people saying, so tired, I'm just so tired. Let somebody else do the intensive program of growth. Or, I've done it a few times and there's been no result. Well, that also is indicative of having to go back and stretch our roots into the soil of the revelation to bring up fresh energies so that we can match the tasks that's been given us. That's the point of this. This first quotation that's up here this morning from the words of Baha'u'llah is a good place to start, I think. Whoso ariseth among you to teach the cause of his Lord, let him, before all else, teach his own self, that his speech may attract the hearts of them that hear him. Unless he teacheth his own self, the words of his mouth will not influence the heart of the seeker. Take heed, O people, lest ye be of them that give good counsel to others, but forget to follow it themselves. The words of such as these and beyond, the words, the realities of all things, and beyond these realities, the angels that are nigh unto God bring against them the accusation of falsehood. Pretty strong statement from Baha'u'llah in that regard. We have to try to follow what we're teaching. We have to try to be the embodiment of it. I think that's clear to all of us. Teach ye the cause of God, O people of Baha. This is like we're talking about the principal action. Of course, the action includes all kinds of things. Includes Baha'i life itself. And actually, if you go up to the quotations of Baha'u'llah, he says that that action which is most pleasing to God is the faithful performance and use of the obligatory prayers. We would say to ourselves, how can what kind of service is that? The point is that it's serving us so that we can serve others. Is the foundation of our Baha'i life. The fast, remember the sun and the moon, the fast and the obligatory prayers, prepares us so that when we're called to action, when we're called to teach, we've got this reinforcement with us. Teach ye the cause of God, O people of Baha, for God hath prescribed unto everyone the duty of proclaiming his message, and regardeth it as the most meritorious of all deeds. Again, he's in the tablets, Baha'u'llah, in one of his tablets says, "Teach thou the cause of God with an utterance which will cause the bushes to be enkindled, and the call, verily there is no God but me, the Almighty, the unconstrained, to be raised therefrom." Then he mentions how human utterance is an essence which aspireth to exert its influence and needeth moderation. As to its influence, this is a conditional upon refinement, which in turn is dependent upon hearts which are detached and pure. As to its moderation, this hath to be combined with tact and wisdom, as prescribed in the Holy Scriptures and tablets. Meditate upon that which hath streamed forth from the heaven of the will of thy Lord, he who is the source of all grace, that thou mayest grasp the intended meaning which is enshrined in the sacred depths of the holy writings. Go to number 5 here. This is now a message on behalf of Shoghi Effendi. His brotherly advice to you and to all loyal and ardent young believers like you is that you should deepen your knowledge of the history and of the tenets of the faith, not merely by means of careful and thorough study, but also through active, wholehearted, and continued participation in all the activities, whether administrative or otherwise, of your community. There's another arena of action, so to speak. The Baha'i community life provides you with an indispensable laboratory where you can translate into living and constructive action the principles which you imbibe from the teachings. By becoming a real part of that living organism, you can catch the real spirit which runs throughout the teachings, the Baha'i teachings. To study the principles and to try to live according to them are therefore the two essential mediums through which you can ensure the development and progress of your inner spiritual life and of your outer existence as well. May Baha'u'llah enable you to attain this high station. And may he keep the torch of faith forever burning in your heart. With respect to the principles of the faith, imbibing the principles of the faith, living the principles of the faith, studying the principles of the faith, one time I did a search for principles in the whole of the opus of Shoghi Effendi, and how many diverse ways he characterizes the principles, the life-giving principles, the essential principles, the God-given principles. So many things. With each of the terms of the faith, if you search through the Guardian's writings, you get a great panorama, vista of how he conceives what the term you're looking at might be. It might be principles. It might be faith, you know. He calls us the infant faith of God. All different kinds of things that you'll find there. I hope you'll explore that a bit. Among the principles that Abdu'l-Baha proclaimed, almost universally on all occasions, you know, we say there are 12 principles. Well, they're not 12 principles. I think the Guardian has 16 in Gopes's Baha'i, and Shoghi Effendi sometimes cites from messages. He says there's 11 principles or 9 principles. It depends on the occasion how many principles you've got, I think. So. But one of them that sometimes I cautiously refer to as the forgotten principle. Can you imagine which one that is, that you don't hear very often? The power of the Holy Spirit. Abdu'l-Baha lists all these principles, and then he says, but all this is dependent upon the power of the Holy Spirit. Without divine confirmation, the thing just doesn't go forward. So we want to remember that, to hold to that in all of our actions, and ask that God can bless us, can confirm us to carry forward, to move forward in the right spirit. There's a compilation that the House of Justice produced for the Baha'i world called The Power of Divine Assistance. This is in compilation of compilations, which I think some of you, the older friends, will have. I found, reading through that and trying my best to analyze and understand its contents, that you could divide the themes there into 3 parts. The first and strongly emphasized aspect of arising to teach and of the power of divine assistance, Shoghi Effendi says, you must first disregard your shortcomings. Now, all of us are thinking, well, I would like to serve the faith, but, this and that, and I just don't feel worthy of it. Or if we focus that way, he says, we will be paralyzed and no one will do anything. So you have to disregard your limitations. You have to think, and then he moves us into the next aspect of this, over and over emphasized by Baha'u'llah, by Abdu'l-Baha, by the Guardian. What do you do then? How do you get away from your shortcomings, in your failings, and all your inadequacies? Because it gets pretty depressing if you focus very much on that. Or not you, but I find that depresses me when I think about it anyway. Not your shortcomings, my shortcomings. Then he says that instead of that, you must hold to the divine promises. Now, we all know this, but we need to, if we're going to hold to the divine promises, we need to have read them and rehearsed them and thought about them. He says he can make, the moth, the eagle, and the drop, the ocean. In one of Shoghi Effendi's messages during the crusade, he said, let the doubters arise and put to proof the promises. Not exact words, but that's, doubter is there, and put to proof the promises is the sense of it. If you're not sure, try it out, see how it works. Do you remember Abdu'l-Baha talking in the peace conferences? He says, we've done a lot of war, how about we try peace for a while? If it doesn't work, we can go back to the other. With the full trust that if we try it, it's going to succeed. So the same thing with us. If we center on these divine promises, if we say, this promise, now we're going to show the power of God. Because if this promise can apply to me, little, meager, humble me that has no meaning at all, that will be a great proof of the power of God. Disregard our own limitations, hold to the promises of God. And what's the third one? Back to the subject of the morning. Arise, act, trust, put your confidence in Him. Those promises then begin to operate through us in the arena of Baha'i service to the rest of mankind. So these 3 steps, I think, are very, very important that we absorb them. And I refer you to that compilation if you can get a copy of that, or maybe some of it can be quoted in the your Baha'i newsletter or something of the sort. That would be very helpful. Going back to a few quotations where he emphasizes the same things we've been talking about. Prayer and meditation are very important factors in deepening the spiritual life of the individual. But with them must go also action and example, as these are the tangible result of the former. Both are essential. just one mature soul with spiritual understanding and a profound knowledge of the faith can set a whole country ablaze. So great is the power of God to work through a pure and selfless channel. A little bit of confirmation here on this. That's one of the promises. Let us search for spiritual understanding and a profound knowledge of the faith, trusting that Baha'u'llah's promise is that he will assist us to set ablaze a country. That was very helpful to Knights of Baha'u'llah when they went out all on their lonesome, to these remote places of the world to begin creating the start of a Baha'i community. Then, lest we lose track, whilst actively teaching, the friends must themselves be taught and deepened in the spirit of the faith, which brings love and unity. So we have this interesting contrast between getting ourselves ready so we can do it right and doing it so we can get it right and deepen at the same time. It's like we're going back and forth, Just as good in our minds to not just hold to one. I think so many of us have tried to act without a real knowledge of the teachings. We find it difficult when we're asked, what is the Baha'i faith? Which is already like the end, terrific challenge that happens in our lives. We get brave and we mention the faith and somebody says, oh, what's that? That's the universe. It's just so big, you don't know where to start. And now, if we've said our prayers in the morning, we've asked for guidance, we said, let the inspiration be on my tongue. Maybe we'll think of something from the teachings that whatever is inspiring us knows in the soul of the listener they want to hear, they need to hear. Because that's what we want to do. We want to try to match the needs of the listener at that stage through wisdom, through our own knowledge. We want to be able to bring them forward a step. Abdu'l-Baha says in one place, if you cite something from the teachings to a soul that is hearing about the faith, that becomes an obstacle for them, that's the wrong psychology in teaching. It's like, meeting a man where you smell liquor on his breath and you say, oh, the Baha'is have a law not to drink. What's the point of that, He says the cause of God, all the teachings, are to draw people to God. Caution that you don't put an obstacle in their way. Now that, of course, depends on the degree of growth of the seeker. What stage can they receive? How much can they receive? What should they receive first? The order of it. Abdu'l-Baha says that the revelation is like a medicine cabinet. Now we meet a soul. I think if we're wise, we let them talk a little bit rather than talking so much ourselves. Letting them talk is like taking their pulse. Then if we have the repertoire, if we have the range of the teachings and things, we know what's in this medicine cabinet, we can choose an appropriate next remedy that will attract them and confirm them. This is a lot. This is all, it depends on experience and step-by-step application of teachings. There are things in the medicine cabinet, if you give them people if they're too weak at a certain stage, it gives them a fever and they pass away. They say, thank you very much, I'm so glad you found something you like. And then there's no progress. Or they think, oh my heavens, this Baha'i faith asks a lot of its followers. Yes, that's right. It wants us to give our lives. And the new person says, well, I don't know if I'm prepared to do that. Sounds like a little bit of a heavy load you're assigning to me, Step by step. Just like it was revealed to us step by step. We read, fortunately, God helps. He kind of blinds our eye to the thing that's going to cause too much consternation. We move forward. We draw from the writings. So I was suggesting the other day that you keep small booklets of verses and things that you find very consoling, that you find match your need at the moment. You know them when you see them. And then you repeat those and use those. And then repeat that again next year. Or after a period of time, you'll add new quotes to it. You learn some of these shorter extracts from prayers and meditations full of wonderful harvest material there. Now, in the course of arising to act, we will face difficulties. It's part of the cycle of growth that we have. Do you know how Shoghi Effendi resolves the whole history of the first Baha'i century into a series of crises and victories? He names the crisis and then he says, and then comes the victory. The crisis sometimes looks like that's the end of everything. Usually the tests we get are like that. This is the end of me, you know. As we beg forgiveness and we beg progress, we beg understanding, and then somehow it goes forward. Think of what happened with the martyrdom of the Bab. My heavens, the end of the world. But Shoghi Effendi said that generated the energies and attracted the grace which then was infused and set afire in the heart of Baha'u'llah and the Siyachal. Couldn't suppress it. They killed the Bab, and now his life came alive in the heart of Baha'u'llah. Crisis and victory. And he goes through a number of them. Look at the case of Mirza Yahya and his opposition to the faith, and how the result of that, Shoghi Effendi said, was Baha'u'llah arose and proclaimed the cause to all the peoples, kings, rulers, ecclesiastics of the whole planet from Adrianople. Is the outcome of the test and the opposition. It just brings forth new outpourings of divine grace. So this happens at the world level in the Baha'i community, in the Baha'i history on the one hand. Shoghi Effendi said it also applies to national Baha'i communities. They go through stages of crises and victories that aren't universal, but they're the situation of a community. Some of the friends were telling me, I don't want to tell any tales, but they said that a few years ago the summer school was practically empty here. That the committee had emphasized that summer school should be like a university. But everybody got shy and backed off and they didn't want to come. I want to go for fun. What a great foil to our life. Fun. Every once in a while I want to do something enjoyable. My wife says, where do you see that in the writings? Where do you see fun in the writings? Find one place. Lots of joy and happiness, but there's no fun. It's a modern concept. Naturally, there will be periods of distress and difficulty, and even severe tests. I don't think anybody in the room is going to deny that kind of statement. That's clear and true and positive. You know exactly about that. But if that person turns firmly toward the divine manifestation, studies carefully his spiritual teachings, and receives the blessings of the Holy Spirit, he will find that in reality these tests and difficulties have become the gifts of God to enable him to grow and develop. To carry forward the same explanation a little, at the national level, crises and victories. At the local spiritual assembly, local Baha'i community level, you see this pattern too. And guess what? You know it yourselves. It comes to us. Our life is all driven by crisis and victory. Tests that, if we're sincere and we're saying our prayers, God sends tests to develop us. They're really a bounty from God. My calamity is my providence. Outwardly it's fire and vengeance. Inwardly it's light and mercy. Usually the first part of it you don't realize that something good is coming. It's so helpful if we have that principle fixed in our mind, we start looking for the silver lining. We start looking for the golden center of this fire. And it gives us comfort and it enables us to hold on. The elements of the new culture of the faith are not unknown from the earlier writings. All these things are strains, threads that come from Baha'u'llah, come through Abdu'l-Baha, come through the Guardian. Here's one that's, you can say, is like the mother of the devotional meetings we've been called upon to have in our communities. Shoghi Effendi says, way back in 56, as we have such wonderful prayers and meditations in our writings, the reading of these with friends who are interested in and crave for this type of small meeting is often a step towards attracting them to the faith. Perhaps you can start such an activity in your city. The character of our action, what kind of action is needed? He says, the need of the hour is teaching on the home front. Its goals can be won by a new spirit of dedication and consecration on the part of the friends, each in his own country, in his own home. Never must they let a day pass without teaching some soul, trusting to Baha'u'llah that the seed will grow. The friend should seek pure souls, gain their confidence, and then teach that person carefully until he becomes a Baha'i. And then nurture him until he becomes a firm and active supporter of the faith. Attraction, we attract the souls. Confirmation, the soul comes to a sufficient degree of acceptance where it says, yes, I believe in this faith. But that's still not action. That has to be carried forward to consecration. Attraction, confirmation, and then consecration, the Guardian said. Lead the souls. You have to take them by the hands. You have to help them. And this is the whole spirit of accompaniment. Don't leave people to themselves. New Baha'is need to be accompanied. They need to be involved in the activities. They can show what a joy can come from participating in all of the various core activities. And that develops them. And don't let go of them. I remember when I became a new Baha'i, they warned me in Los Angeles. They said, once you say, I'm a Baha'i, it's like hot potato. They drop you. They say, oh, you're inside. That's all right. We're going to look. Now we deal with other people. I felt really abandoned at the beginning. The friend should seek pure souls. That's another thing. There was a line here about praying in the morning. When you say your prayers and you say teaching prayers, I don't hope you will say teaching prayers, that you ask Baha'u'llah, guide me to waiting souls. It's not everybody that's ready, but there are. We need Baha'u'llah to move us around and to move them around so that we meet somehow and can carry forward and bring them to maturity. It's not sufficient to pray diligently for guidance, but this prayer must be followed by meditation as to the best methods of action. This is what's, in a sense, that's become also as its corporate dimension in our reflection meetings, where we gather together and talk about what we're doing and what seems to be working and what doesn't seem to be working, and how can we take the next step effectively, and searching the messages of the house to seek clues and hints about that. followed by meditation as to the best methods of action, and then action itself. Even if the action should not immediately produce results, or perhaps not be entirely correct, that does not make so much difference, because prayers can only be answered through action. And if someone's action is wrong, God can use that method of showing the pathway which is right. The other thing they told me when I was a new Baha'i, he said, now you're a Baha'i, you've got the engine of your life going, it's like moving in a car. You've got to put fuel in the car, but also God can't guide you if you're sitting there parked and saying, oh God, guide me. Still just sitting there. You want to know. If you move, He can help to indicate what's next, what you should be doing next. You can begin identifying missing elements, if you will, or what should the next step in my life be? Because I think we should all be asking that. What's the next step of service in my life that I can take that'll result in effective growth of the cause? Which is the part of the plans that most matches the way I feel comfortable serving? Although sometimes we have to serve in uncomfortable ways. Everybody that's been elected to a local assembly knows about that. Another lovely promise from the guardian. A best teacher and an exemplary believer is ultimately neither more nor less than an ordinary Baha'i who has consecrated himself to the work of the faith, deepened his knowledge and understanding of its teachings, placed his confidence in Baha'u'llah, and arisen to serve him to the best of his ability. This door is one which we are assured will open before the face of every follower of the faith who knocks hard enough, so to speak. When the will and the desire are strong enough, the means will be found and the way opened, either to do more work locally or to enter the pioneer field, foreign pioneer field. One of the friends, the guardian asked about one of the goals at the pilgrim table of one of the friends, and the friends said that yes, there was a goal, but it doesn't look like it's the will of God. It might not be the will of God. I can imagine saying that to the guardian. Anyway, he took the occasion and he said, finding the will of God is like coming to a door and knocking for the door to open. If the door doesn't open, he said, form a fist and pound on the door. If that doesn't work, then push it with your whole hand. If that doesn't work, then with the arm and the elbow. And finally, throw yourself against the door entirely. If it doesn't open, maybe it's not the will of God. This is back to this persevere to this poor blighter on this desert island, Sometimes we give up too easily. We have to become immune to the tests and difficulties which we give to each other. Maybe some Baha'i criticizes us or says something unpleasant about the way we're serving or what we've done or what we said to somebody. We have to get thick-skinned. We need thick spiritual skin to survive in the activities of the faith. How many people become still because of some Baha'i said this or some Baha'i said that? No. Keep your eyes focused on the writings. Keep your eyes focused on the power of the Holy Spirit. That seems to be the theme that is repeated over and over. Another paragraph of this same letter of the guardian. This is one of the last of his life. Look, September 21st, 1957. Passed away October 4th. The Baha'is are the leaven of God, which must leaven the lump of their nation. In direct ratio to their success will be the protection vouchsafed not only to them, but to their country. These are the immutable laws of God from which there is no escape. For unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required. All of us know Baha'u'llah has come. All of us have embraced that truth. That puts us in a position quite distinct from the vast multitudes of mankind that don't know that. If nothing else, we can convey that fact. We can say a new message has come from God. You better check it out. This is if you can say, the minimal we can do. Proclaim that it exists. If people say, oh, I'd like to know more about that, all right. Draw them into the other activities. There's an interesting passage which has motivated me a lot in the work that I've been doing, trying to do for the cause. It's a story, and it's recounted by Anis Rideout, one of the early believers, and it's been printed several times in Star of the West over the years. It's a woman, she writes, "On that day as I came into his presence, he immediately said, 'Are there any questions?' At once I asked the question, 'Which is the best way to give the Baha'i message?' Abdu'l-Baha's face became very serious. His voice loud as he answered in these words, 'The first thing to do is to acquire a thirst for spirituality. Then live the life. Live the life. Live the life.' Then he gives the source. How can we do this? The way to acquire this thirst is to meditate upon the future life. We might have said to study the divine plan. We might have said all kinds of things. He says meditate on the future life. Study the holy words, read your Bible, read the holy books, especially study the holy utterances of Baha'u'llah. Prayer and meditation take much time for these two. Then you will know this great thirst. And then only can you begin to live the life." Now, why do you suppose the significance of the next world and of the future of the soul is so important? Maybe something that Ali, the Imam Ali, said would help us. He said that we should live each day materially as if we're going to live forever. Well organized, systematically, practical steps. And we should live each day spiritually as if we are going to pass away at sunset. When you're thinking, I'm going to pass away tonight, you're a little more cautious about your activities, about your thoughts, about everything. You're preparing yourself all the time. But on the other hand, you can't let your family starve, and you've got to do all these other things. So you've got these two patterns of existence. It seems to me that's very close to this question of why we need to think about the future life. So much is dependent on that. If we realize we're really just in an embryonic womb stage here, and we're going to issue into a realm that has multiple stages and worlds within worlds within worlds. After Baha'u'llah, when he talks about it, he said, glorious worlds are ahead of you. And you will attain to each of them. You're believers. You've accepted the manifestation. That's a covenant. He is drawing you forward. He's looking for your best interests. You've placed, in a sense, your trust in him by having embraced the cause and set in motion all kinds of bounties. In the tablet, another tablet to Leonora Armstrong, Leonora Halsapple, the master says that entrance into the cause is embraced by eternal sovereignty. Do you remember in the hidden words, the first hidden words, that thine, possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that thine may be a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. I used to think, oh, I wish I'd been born a long time ago, or I'd been born in the time of Baha'u'llah. That's kind of idle thinking, because probably if I was born in Baha'u'llah's time in Los Angeles, I wouldn't have known anything about the Baha'i faith. So we all think, well, maybe I could have been from this time or that time. Or, why have I come into existence if this realm of being has existed for all eternity, forever? I'm coming rather late onto the scene here. I've missed things, But this hidden word says no. If a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that attracts to you the consciousness of all eternity. You'll have access to all these events. Shoghi Effendi had wanted to see the martyrdom of the Bab. He had a dream, and he saw the whole thing in a dream. Everything is recorded. Maybe we'll be able to play back some of these great events in the next world when we get there. I don't know. But the point is, once you've entered eternity, then that's a sovereignty. Ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. Worth some preparatory steps here to see if we can get to that in a proper condition. Remember I mentioned, Ryokanam said, the worst thing about going to the next world is the remorse for all the steps and opportunities we missed while we were alive here. I wanted to take a little time just at the end here to quote from a few. See, I think they may be here. Oh, look, they're here. Good. This is a tablet translated from the Arabic in more recent times from Abdul Baha. And he talks about, with respect to proofs and evidences that we should use when teaching the cause. I think from time to time we're reading maybe some answered questions or some of the talks of Abdul Baha. We see that he said that we should gather the proofs. For instance, he said, here are the rational proofs for the existence of God, and he sets forth a number of them. In another talk, he sets some other ones. Compile those, learn those. Proofs and evidences of the existence of the soul. I'm saying this to myself as well as to you. Someone comes and says, can you give me proofs that the soul exists? The good book tells us so. Do we have the tools that he's given us? Have we collected them? Have we made them our own so that we can use them? Have we convinced ourselves in another way, in a deeper way, by these proofs and evidences too? Back to the master telling Juliet, smiles are not enough. You've got to absorb the teachings. And from amongst all creatures he hath singled out man to grant him his most wondrous gift, and hath made him to attain the bounties of the company on high. That most precious of gifts is attainment under his unfailing guidance, that the inner reality of humankind should become as a niche to hold this lamp. Our inner reality becomes a lamp. And when the scattering splendors of this light do beat against the bright glass of the heart's purity maketh the beams to blaze out even stronger than before, to shine in glory on the minds and souls of men. You remember he's making the likeness to the lamps of that time. Anybody that's ever had a kerosene lamp or seen how when you light a kerosene lamp by itself, it has a certain brightness. But when you put a clean glass over the top of it, then it really gets bright. It's a kind of miraculous change, you know. And it's the light, it's the glass that he said should be pure, and then the light will go out. and blaze even stronger and shine in glory on the minds and souls of men. This is a lamp of guidance that we need in us to shine and create guidance and offer the way to other souls. The attainment of the most great guidance is dependent upon knowledge and wisdom, and on being informed as to the mysteries of the holy words. Wherefore must the loved ones of God, be they young or old, be they men or women, each one according to his capabilities. It doesn't ask of us more than we're capable. We must, according to that measure, strive to acquire the various branches of knowledge and to increase his understanding of the mysteries of the holy books and his skill in marshalling the divine proofs and evidences. You know, one very consoling letter from the Guardian, and that's in the writings of the Master, of course, too. He said, when we're called to pay account for ourselves, for our lives in the next world, and he said, we will be called to account. We will be judged in the next world. We will be judged according to the gifts we were given and what we did with those gifts. Not what anybody else received and what they did with them. Abdu'l-Wahab says, such a waste, envy is such a waste, jealous is such a waste of time. Because it deprives you of your gifts while you're worrying about this person has gotten elected to the assembly and I didn't get elected to the assembly or some nonsense of that sort. I remember there's one letter from Baha'is in the Caribbean before there were national assemblies. The delegates at the time of the National Convention were elected by local assemblies instead of by all the believers in regional conventions, so to speak. And they were saying, oh, we've been deprived of our rights to vote and so on. Shoghi Effendi said, this is a temporary stage. You have not been deprived of the supreme opportunity of teaching the cause. Administration is something we do because we have to do it. But teaching is something we want to be at the forefront of the teaching activity all the time. Bringing new souls, that's really the activity. And he says, if we make administration an end in itself, the cause won't go forward. We're not trying to make perfect administrative instruments. We're trying to attract new souls to the cause. It needs millions to do that, to see the inherent structure of the kingdom that gradually comes out as more and more souls are attracted and relate to each other throughout the world. When your hearts are wholly attracted to the one true God, you will acquire divine knowledge. Okay. Lifetime task. How do we get our hearts to be wholly attracted to the one true God? How do we put the love of God, an attraction, an affection for Him ahead of everything else? And what does it mean? I think we know enough from the writings to realize it's our attachment to Baha'u'llah, our turning to Baha'u'llah, our understanding of Baha'u'llah. We need to read his history. Remember my days during thy days, and my distress and banishment. To the degree that we become attracted to the one true God, then we acquire divine knowledge. We'll become attentive to the proofs and testimonies, and will commit to memory the glad tidings concerning the manifestation of the beauty of the All-Merciful, as mentioned in the heavenly scriptures. Then ye shall behold how wondrous are his confirmations, and how gracious is his assistance. There are a lot of these things that are helpful to put in that promise department we were talking about before, where forget our own limitations and hold to his promises. What marvelous promises inherent in these verses. It is imperative to acquire the knowledge of divine proofs and evidences, and to acquaint oneself with convincing testimonies which demonstrate the revelation of God's resplendent light. The study group thou didst organize hath imparted much joy and happiness to the heart of Abdu'l-Baha. Thou must exert much effort and show forth perseverance and constancy, that God willing, through the reviving breaths of his mercy, souls may be so educated as to become like radiant candles, shining in the assemblage of divine knowledge and understanding. This matter is highly important. It's binding on everyone and must be regarded as an obligation. There's another letter, friends, I wanted to end with today, which seems to be off the subject, but I find it so informative, so useful, that I wanted to share it with you. And I don't have it to project, so you'll follow it carefully. It's published in Lights of Guidance on page 513. And the subject matter is about dreams. Someone has asked the guardian if we can gain truth, or can we trust the dreams that we have, the guidance that's given to us. In the course of explaining about this, a number of very important principles, I think, come to light about human beings in general. And it goes back to some of the original discussion that we were having about the real veils, the real elements we're fighting in order to arise to the kind of appropriate action which we're being called for, have to do with ego and passions and desires, inappropriate. Shoghi Effendi, through a secretary, writes, the truth is often imparted through dreams. That truth is often imparted through dreams. No one who is familiar with history, especially religious history, can doubt the visions of the lesser prophets. And I think all of us, maybe anybody that's been in the field moving around a lot, realizes how many people are guided by dreams, how many people come into your house and they see the picture of the master and that's the one that came to me and told me, or that's the one that healed me. The master's everywhere, He's just everywhere in the hearts of the people. We have to expose our own knowledge of it to them. So, religious history demonstrates that. At the same time, he says, dreams and vision are always colored and influenced more or less by the mind of the dreamer. And we must beware of attaching too much importance to them. The purer and more free from prejudice and desire our hearts and minds become, the more likely is it that our dreams will convey reliable truth. But if we have strong prejudices, personal likings and aversions, bad feelings or evil motives, these will warp and distort any inspirational impression that comes to us. We have a true dream from God. We interpret it upside down and backwards and think we've been guided by God to stick our hand where we shouldn't stick it, In many cases, he says, dreams have been the means of bringing people to the truth or of confirming them in the faith. We see that in various episodes of the very beginning of the faith, from the Dawnbreakers on. Wonderful stories. We must strive to become pure in heart and free from all save God. Then our dreams, and here's a kicker's phrase, then our dreams as well as our waking thoughts will become pure and true. We should test the impressions we get through dreams, visions, or inspirations by comparing them with the revealed word and seeing whether they are in full harmony therewith. That's the test, ultimate test. We get a dream, we feel inspired to do something. Is this the will of God, or am I understanding this in the wrong way? By comparing it to the writings, if it isn't contrary to the writings, you can feel that you can take your choice with regard to doing it. But in another letter, Shoghi Effendi says, if dreams were the way of advancing the human race, there would be no need for revelation. Revelation occupies a higher degree. That's where the whole pure guidance is. Then we compare our understandings with it and we see whether they match up or not, as to understand whether to act on inspiration or something we receive. But what it's telling us here is that in our waking thoughts, again, our thought is our reality. We were talking about that, what the Master says. This inspiration is flowing to us all the time. It's because of our egos and attachment to the wrong things. It gets distorted when it comes to us. But it's not a moment it isn't shining on us. Abdu'l-Baha says in other tablets, if the light, if the emanation, the sun, the rays of the sun of truth weren't shining on us for even an instant, we would be totally lost. But our capacity to become aware of that depends on these 4 steps as well. So this is just not success in outer activities, it's the success of the whole of our existence. And how can we sharpen our participation in these points so as to give greater effectiveness to our life and bring more of the guidance of God to humanity? Thank you.